Let us start where most of us secretly live, and where, if we are honest, we have been living even while believing ourselves to be devoted. The moment when prayer turns into mental labor. You know that moment because you can feel it in your body before you hear it in your words. The forehead tightens, the breath shortens, the chest presses forward with urgency, and the mind begins to loop, to circle, to pick at the same spot as if repetition could manufacture grace. That is not communion. That is control. It is the mind attempting to manage what only grace can reveal. And you may rest assured, the more intense that strain, the further we have drifted from the thing itself. Now watch how common this is. We get on our knees, or we sit in our chair, and we proceed to repeat phrases we have loved. We review the problem as if the problem were the power. We negotiate outcomes with heaven. If you will only do this, I will do that. And all the while, the attention never leaves the storm. The words say God, but the gaze is fixed on lack, on danger, on the diagnosis, on the bill. We try to make God hear us, as though God were at a distance, requiring a better argument or a louder cry. Honestly, isn't it remarkable that in the name of faith, we practice worry with religious vocabulary? That is not prayer. That is fear in a suit and tie. Let me set the path in front of you, because there is a simple order here, and I am going to keep us to it. The first step is recognition. Whenever prayer becomes thinking harder, we admit that overthinking is resistance. We are pushing against what we dare not trust. The second step is return. We turn from the outer picture and come home to the Father within. Not to a sky god, not to a far-off deity, but to the presence at the center of your own being, where I and the Father are one, is not a verse to admire, but an identity to recognize. The third step is rest. We do not press. We do not bargain. We do not rehearse solutions. We abide until thought yields to presence. Then, and only then, you watch the fruits appear as supply, peace, guidance, protection, health, harmony, success. You remember the Master said, "Take no thought," and you may rest assured he was not giving poetry. He was giving law. Never forget, increased effort in the mind does not increase God. God is not moved by your strain. God is the moving of your being when you stop trying to move him. The kingdom of God is within you. The wellspring of life is within you. The substance of your good is not out there to be persuaded, it is here to be realized. There is nothing in the world too good for those on this path. Not health, not abundance, not protection. Yachts, palaces, or the smallest loaf daily on your table. But none of it arrives by mental clutching. The strain you feel in prayer is not devotion. It is the mind trying to manage what only grace can reveal. So our work begins with one holy diagnosis and one gentle correction. Cease the managing and consent to the presence. Now let me take you to the one shift. And if you make this once, you are going to discover that the whole landscape of prayer changes. And it changes not by adding anything, but by subtracting the strain. The shift is from talking about God to letting the Father within speak. You remember the Master's sentence, "I and the Father are one." That was not a compliment paid to Jesus. That was a revelation of identity, a law of being, and it is the doorway to true prayer. If I and the Father are one, then where is this God you are trying to reach? Not out there to be persuaded, not up there to be signaled with brighter words, but here, closer than your breath, the life of your life. So prayer, as we are learning it, is not effort directed outward, it is consent inward. It is the point where thought ends and grace begins. Now we must distinguish the letter of prayer from the spirit of prayer. The letter is talk, phrases, formulas, the composing of better sentences, even the respectable reheating of yesterday's devotions. The spirit is listening, receptivity, stillness, the humility to be silent until an answering response rises. You remember the Master warned, "When ye pray, use not vain repetitions." And then he gave the reason. "For your Father knoweth what things ye have need of, before ye ask him." Does that not tell you the direction? If the Father already knows, then prayer is not the act of informing, it is the act of consenting. Be still and know that I am God. That is not an invitation to do more talking. That is the instruction to let the inner knowing dawn. And when he says, "The Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the works," he is showing you the secret. The works are not produced by multiplied thoughts. They are issued by the indwelling presence when consent is given. So here is your practical coaching, because I don't want this to be poetry to you. I want it to become a practice. Notice the exact moment your mind tries to add one more thought to secure an outcome, one more argument, one more timeline, one more anxious "and what if?" That very moment is your bell. Stop there. Turn within. Without words if you can, with the softest words if you must. "Father, here I am." And then do nothing. Wait. Not for a sentence to appear in your head, not for a plan to march out, but for the felt assurance that the presence is here and sufficient. You will feel it as a loosening, a warmth, a quiet, perhaps only as the slipping away of the need to push. That is the answering response. That is the instant prayer changes. And you may rest assured, this is not passivity. It is alignment with the only activity that produces results. "In quietness and in confidence shall be your strength," the prophet said. And the Master sealed it with, "Take no thought." You watch what happens when the inner consent is established. Guidance appears without debate. Supply arrives without bargaining. Health rises without fear's commentary, and protection is known without panic's rehearsal. There is no distance to cover, not even enough space to fit a piece of tissue paper between you and your God. So there is nothing to reach. There is only something to recognize. Consent to the Father within, and you will find that the works follow, not because you have managed them, but because the doer has been allowed to do. Now, because we have opened the door to the Father within, I must give you the correction that keeps that door from being slammed by the old habit. And this is very simple to say, though it takes honesty to practice. The mind that overthinks in prayer is not loving God, it is fearing something. It is fearing lack, so it rehearses budgets as if columns of figures could become faith. It is fearing time, so it checks the clock and hurries God as if the eternal could be late. It is fearing outcomes, so it composes arguments and contingency plans and calls that being responsible, when, honestly, it is only trying to control the future by mental noise. You can feel this if you will just stop for a moment. Overthinking tightens. Trust loosens. Overthinking leans forward. Trust rests back. Overthinking bargains. Trust consents. Here is the spiritual mechanic behind it, and you may rest assured it is law. Overthinking is a confession. It says, God is absent and must be persuaded. The presence is not enough. My thought must fill the gap. That is the hidden doubt. We do not trust oneness, so we import substitutes. But grace, you see, is another confession altogether. Grace says, God is present and needs no persuading. The Father within is the doer. My part is consent. Which of these confessions is your prayer making? You cannot demonstrate peace while worshiping anxiety. You cannot set the mind to arguing and call it prayer. A house divided against itself cannot stand, and a consciousness divided between fear and faith cannot receive. Now you remember the Master's operational instruction. And he meant operational. Take no thought for your life. He did not mean laziness. He meant a deliberate withdrawal of worship from appearances. Do not put the problem on the throne and then throw incense at it with religious words. Do not place the bill, the diagnosis, the deadline in the Holy of Holies, and then beg God to visit your idol. Which of you, by taking thought, can add 1 cubit to his stature? It is almost humorous, isn't it, that we try to grow life by staring at the measuring stick. Be careful for nothing, Paul adds, no anxious care, and then, in the same breath, turns us Godward with thanksgiving, not with argument. So the correction comes in 2 steps, and I give them to you plainly. First, name the fear that is trying to take the wheel. Say it softly inside. This is fear of lack, or this is fear of time, or this is fear of outcomes. Naming it unmasks it. Second, withdraw thought's worship. Take it off the problem and relocate it in the presence. Not by a torrent of sentences, but by the gentlest turning. Father, thou art here. Then stop the performance and rest long enough to feel the shift from managing to being managed by grace. Do you see? We are not abandoning prudence. We are abandoning idolatry. Plans will come, guidance will come, but they come clean when they are added to a heart that has refused to bow to appearances. Never forget, there is not even enough space to slip a piece of tissue paper between you and your God. Oneness is the fact. Overthinking is the denial. When you refuse to enthrone the appearance, when you heed, take no thought, as a practical stance and not as poetry, the inner government takes its seat, and you watch, quietly, steadily, as supply, health, and right action begin to appear without the whip of your mind, because the doer has been acknowledged and the doubt laid down. Now, because I do not want you to take my word for any of this, I am going to give you the authority in Scripture, and you will hear the chain that has been ringing through every age, if you have ears to hear. You remember the Master said, "Take no thought for your life." Which of you, by taking thought, can add 1 cubit to his stature? And in the same breath of teaching, without changing the subject, he said, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you." That is not poetry. That is method. That is not an invitation to intensify thought. That is a directive to change its direction, and to remove all doubt about the geography, he adds, by way of another witness. The kingdom of God is within you. Do you see how the sentences lock? Take no thought of externals. Seek the kingdom. The kingdom is within. The evidence will be added. Now we must translate this in its mystical sense, because if you picture a far-off realm, you will remain a beggar at the gate of your own house. The kingdom is not a country. It is consciousness. It is the recognition of indwelling presence, the inner government taking its rightful seat. I and the Father are one is the constitutional law of that kingdom. The Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the works, is its executive branch. When the attention turns within and rests, not in words, but in awareness, be still and know. That knowing is the kingdom recognized, and the moment of recognition is the end of mental managing and the beginning of grace. What then is the promise? And all these things shall be added. Added is the outer form of an inner fact. Added is the natural overflow of realized presence. Supply answering, not because you calculated it, but because substance within externalizes. Harmony appearing, not because you argued it, but because peace within radiates. Protection known, not because you pled for it, but because life within encloses. Right activity unfolding, not because you outlined it, but because wisdom within governs. Consider the lilies, he said. They do not spin plans, yet something within them clothes them, and that something is within you as wellspring and meat you know not of. John gives you the same law in other words. The word, presence, becomes flesh, form. Added is flesh to word, effect to cause, visibility to the invisible you consented to. And so in practice we do away with bargaining. We do away with pleading. We do away with outlining. We do away with the belief that God is out there. We do away with the house-divided consciousness that prays to a distant deity and then clutches at appearances. We take no thought as to the thing. We take all our thought to the kingdom. We seek the withinness of God until the answering response, however slight, says, I am here. And then we stand still long enough for the Father within to be felt as the doer. You may rest assured, when the government is recognized within, the administration is seen without. Health, harmony, wholeness, joy, peace, power, dominion, success, added, not manufactured. Scripture does not instruct intensified thinking. It commands a shift of attention to the kingdom within, and then, unfailingly, you watch what is needed be added. Let me bring our first witness to the stand, because I want you to see this not as my idea, but as the way of God through all Scripture. You remember Moses, and you remember that he did not receive a theology at a distance. He received a name in the fire of presence. I am that I am. And the voice did not send him off to search for a deity in the skies. It said, in effect, remove the sandals of separation from your feet, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground. Now, do you see the geography? Not far off heaven, not a mountain to climb with better arguments, but here, the holiness of presence at the center of being. I am is not a title over God's door. It is the life of your own life, the Father within announcing himself. From that moment on, the story ceases to be one of human logistics and becomes the record of inner recognition, externalizing as whatever is needed. They were led, we are told, by a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Does that mean God was pushing smoke and flames around like stage effects? You know better than that. It means guidance as consciousness, direction felt within, taking visible shape without. The go now, wait now, turn here certainty that comes when the I am has your attention. And manna in the wilderness? Is it bread sprinkled from some celestial bakery? Or is it the substance of inner wellspring, showing forth as food at the hour required? Believe it or not, that is not magic. That is law. The substance of our good is within us, and at the right time it appears out here as form. Now watch this too, because this is where it comes home to Portland, or Pasadena, or the very kitchen where you are sitting. The desert is not merely sand. The desert is any place the mind says, there isn't enough. Not enough money, not enough time, not enough health, not enough love. And what do we do in that desert? We start counting sacks of flour. We outline routes. We multiply phone calls and spreadsheets. And we call it prayer by adding a "Dear God" on the front. That is not prayer. That is mental trucking. The Red Sea does not open to a better calculator. It opens to stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. It opens to the cessation of mental strain and the consent to I am. When the inner government is acknowledged, the waters part by the rhythm of grace, and you walk through on dry ground. The same earth that a moment earlier looked like drowning becomes passage. So here's how it demonstrates now. The pillar of cloud and fire appears to you as the quiet insistence, not yet, when all your planning says, hurry, and that restraint saves you. It appears as the nudge to make one call you had not outlined, and the door opens without knocking. It appears as the sudden peace that ends the argument you were composing, and protection is known before danger can mature. Manna appears as an unexpected check, yes, but also as an idea, a client, a solution, the right word at the right time. Added, not forced. Water from the rock appears as refreshment in the very schedule that looked dry as dust. Strength for the day, clarity for the decision, humor where heaviness sat. And it bubbles from within because I have meat ye know not of is your own confession now. Never forget, the rod Moses lifted was not a magic stick. It was authority. The authority of I am over appearance. When you raise that inner recognition above the sea of evidence, you are not commanding waves with thoughts. You are consenting to the presence that governs waves. And governance becomes visible as order, timing, supply. You may rest assured, when I am is realized within, provision is not forced by thought. It appears as the natural activity of presence. So the next time the desert whispers, not enough, do not run your camels harder. Remove your sandals. Stand still. Let the Father within announce himself, and watch how the cloud goes before you. The fire keeps you. The bread arrives, and the rock breaks open into rivers. That is prayer ceasing to be control and becoming communion. And that is the beginning of added things. Now let me bring Elijah to the stand as our second demonstration, and you will see the same law in another costume. You remember how the word of the Lord came to him, "Get thee unto the brook Cherith," and he went, and ravens fed him there. Is that superstition, birds flying in like waiters from a celestial hotel? You know better than that. It is the inner direction obeyed, meeting the outer need in a form he could not have plotted on paper. He did not outline a supply chain. He listened. And when that brook dried, the voice sent him on to a widow in Zarephath. "Make me thereof a little cake first," the prophet said, not because he was selfish, but because first means presence first, the recognition of source before the calculation of flour. And what happened? The barrel did not waste. The cruse of oil did not fail. Believe it or not, that is not a fairy tale. That is the law of inner substance. When source is honored within, form is added without, and it does not run down by being shared. It multiplies as it moves. But the clearest teaching, the one that meets us right where our overthinking sits, is his meeting at Horeb. You remember he fled to the cave, and there came a great and strong wind, noise, then an earthquake, disturbance, then a fire, drama. And the record says, God was not in the wind, nor in the earthquake, nor in the fire. After the fire, a still small voice. Now watch this, because it is the heart of our method. The presence does not argue. It does not shout over your panic. It does not deliver its guidance in the key of your urgency. It waits for the hush. The one shift is from composing speeches to consenting to silence, from the mental storm to quiet governance. And the moment you stop talking, inwardly as well as outwardly, grace gives instruction. How do you recognize that very moment? By feel, and you may rest assured you already know it. The breath softens, the shoulders release, the forehead unknots, the chest stops leaning forward to push life along. The searchlight of how goes out, and there is a simple awareness, not a sentence even, just a rightness filling the space. It requires no explanation, because it is not a plan arguing for itself. It is presence felt as sufficient. Out of that, a word may come. Call this person. Wait a day. Take the lower seat. Go to Charith. Not dramatic, not many words, but peaceful and precise. So here is your practice, because this must be lived, or it is only lovely language. The instant you hear yourself arguing in prayer, explaining, bargaining, rehearsing, stop. Do not finish the speech. Turn within and be still. If you need a doorway, use the gentlest. Father, here. Then wait until the breath finds you and the need to manage lets go. Do not reach for sentences. Receive the stillness. Out of that quiet, instruction comes, often simple, often surprising, always peaceful. And when you act on that peace, you watch what happens. The ravens appear as an email you did not expect, the cake as the little you share that somehow enlarges, the cruse of oil as strength that does not fail through the whole day. Never forget, the Father within doeth the works, and the works are added when we stop performing at the altar and start listening in the cave. Grace is heard in stillness. The still, small voice cannot be received while you are mentally composing speeches to God. Seek the kingdom within until the hush comes, and then move only on the peace that follows. That is Elijah's lesson, and it remains our way. Less talking about God, more letting God be God in us. And supply, guidance, protection, health, harmony, wholeness will be added. Now we come to the pattern itself, and I want you to hold this, because it is the center line on which the whole practice hangs. You remember the Master's own confession, and he made it more than once so that there would be no confusion. I can, of mine own self, do nothing. The Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the works. That is not humility as a virtue on a poster. That is method. That is prayer as yielding, not striving, as recognition, not persuasion. And to make sure we did not turn prayer into a speech contest, he warned, "When ye pray, use not vain repetitions." And then gave the reason. For your Father knoweth what things ye have need of, before ye ask him. Now watch the logic. If the Father already knows, and the Father within does the works, where is the place for multiplied words? The place is for abiding until the doer is felt, and then letting the doer do. You see this in his rhythm with people and with circumstances. He often withdrew from the crowd, up to the mountain alone, into a solitary place, into the night. And when he returned, there were not essays and outlines. They were simple words that rode on the current of realized presence. stretch forth thine hand. Peace, be still. Arise, take up thy bed, and walk. Even at the tomb of Lazarus, he does not bargain with heaven. He lifts his eyes and says, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me, and I knew that thou hearest me always. And then, out of that assurance, not toward it, Lazarus, come forth. Do you see how thought has already ended before command begins? The argument is finished in the closet. The act appears in the street. Where thought ends, grace begins. And when grace is felt, action is effortless, precise, effective. Now put this beside modern praying, and you will see why our wheels spin. We outline to God as if heaven were a contractor awaiting our specs. We time the miracle as if the eternal ran on our clock. We repeat phrases to convince ourselves and call that faith. But Jesus does not speak to get God to act. He abides to let the already acting presence be recognized. Abide in me, and I in you. Without me, ye can do nothing. And then the promise, properly understood. If ye abide in me, and my words abide in you, ye shall ask what ye will, and it shall be done. Ask, there is not a shopping list. It is consent. It is the inner yes that lets the Father within show himself as form without. Word made flesh, kingdom recognized, and then added evidence. So here's the Christ method in the plainest sequence, and you may rest assured it is reproducible. First, withdraw. Enter into thy closet. Shut the door on appearances, the crowd, and even the religious noise in your own head. Second, abide. Be still until the hush comes, until the burden of managing lifts and the presence is felt as sufficient. Not many words, perhaps none, only the sweet rightness that says, I am here. Third, act only on that peace. Move when moved, speak when sent, wait when quietness holds you. Then you watch what happens. Health appears not as fought-for victory, but as the natural overflow of life. Harmony and wholeness spread into affairs. Supply shows up as ideas, opportunities, checks, and daily bread. Protection is known without panic. Right companionship finds you without chase. Right place opens without pry bars. Right activity unfolds without grind. Joy, peace, power, dominion, success. Added, not manufactured. Never forget, there is nothing in the world too good for the children of God. But none of it is secured by mental strain. The Christ method is this and only this. Abide until the Father within is felt as the doer. Then the works follow. Not many words, not a better argument, a better silence, a truer consent, and the presence of God revealing himself as your very life. Now I want to bring two more witnesses, and with them you will hear the same music in a different key, so that there can be no doubt that this is not my method, nor a sect's method, but the way of God through all Scripture. You remember we called it I Am with Moses, the still small voice with Elijah, the Father within with Jesus. Now Paul calls it Christ, and John calls it the Word. Different names, same indwelling presence. Paul's sentence is clear enough to live by. Christ liveth in me. Not, I am trying to get Christ to visit me. Not, someday I hope Christ will approve me. But present tense indwelling. Christ liveth in me. And then he adds the operational clause. The life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God. Now watch this, because it is our method in Pauline clothing. The life in the visible is governed by a faith that does not originate in human thought. It is the inner Christ faith living me, not my mind living Christ. John comes in beside him and tells the same truth with his own poetry. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was made flesh. If you hear that mystically, and you must, you will rest from superstition and come into law. Word there is not syllables. Word is presence, consciousness, the living reality of God at the center. Flesh is not carnality. Flesh is form, visibility, the added thing. So, the Word was made flesh is the whole secret said in one line. The realized presence becomes visible as life, health, harmony, wholeness, supply, protection, guidance, added, not manufactured. And to make sure you never feel outside of this, he says, "Of his fullness have all we received, and grace for grace." Not scraps, not dribbles, fullness received, grace replacing strain, grace upon grace as the rhythm of your days. Now you may rest assured, this is not asking you to climb some ladder to become spiritual. Paul does not say, become what you are not. He says, put on the new man, which is to say, agree with what already is. He calls it the mystery now made manifest. Christ in you, the hope of glory. Not far off, not wages for perfect performance. Christ in you, now, the only hope and the only glory. And Jesus seals it in your heart with, "At that day ye shall know that I am in my Father, and ye in me, and I in you." John echoes it in another place. "Greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world." Do you see the continuity? Different names, one presence. Different voices, one law. The indwelling recognized becomes the outwardly seen. Translate that into your Monday morning, and the haze lifts. Word made flesh means consciousness made visible. The peace you consent to within externalizes as settled meetings and straight paths. The love you allow within becomes right companionship and reconciled homes. The assurance you receive within appears as supply, ideas, opportunities, clients, checks, daily bread. The life you feel within answers as health, not fought for, but rising of itself as the natural activity of presence. You do not push this into being with argument. You let it be by ceasing the argument and consenting to what is already true. All that the Father hath is mine, not because I concluded it, but because oneness is the fact, and there is not space enough for a piece of tissue paper between God and myself. So here is where I am taking you next, and I want you ready. We are not going to think about these truths. We are going to rest until they register as felt reality. We will sit down inside Christ liveth in me, and we will be still inside the Word was made flesh, not reciting, not persuading, but waiting for the answering response, the hush, the loosening, the inner yes that says the Father within is sufficient. And then you watch what happens. The same presence, by any of its holy names, will show itself as your very life, and the evidence will be added. Now I have to give you a principle that explains so much of our frustration, and if you will accept it, you will save yourself years of running in circles. Consciousness determines environment. You can move houses, you can change cities, you can leave one job for another, you can swap one church for the next, you can download 3 new prayer apps and buy a different journal, and, believe it or not, If the same fear is governing within, the same strain will reprint itself out here with new names and fresh stationery. You can take a person out of the ghetto, but you can't take the ghetto out of a person, if that is their consciousness. And I'm not speaking about a zip code now, I'm naming a state of mind, scarcity, suspicion, control, hurry, the inner neighborhood of fear. We carry it like luggage and then wonder why every hotel room looks the same. I don't know how you're situated here in Portland, and I don't much mind whether you're thinking of Los Angeles or London, because the geography I'm after is the one behind your ribs. You can relocate the body, but you take your heart with you. You can change the cast, but you keep the script if you don't change the author within. A man leaves a tense office for a higher salary and finds the same panic in a nicer chair. A woman ends a relationship to escape criticism and meets the same voice with a different face. A devoted student tries a new technique: shorter prayers, longer prayers, candles, no candles, and still prays in a sweat because the altar hasn't moved. It's still dedicated to control. Overthinking is not a paragraph problem. It is a consciousness. Until it shifts, prayer remains management with religious labels. Now you remember the Master's order of working. Take no thought for your life. Seek the kingdom. Let it be added. That is inner causation in one breath. You will be moved first in consciousness and then in circumstance. Never reverse the sequence. When the inner government takes its seat, when presence is honored above appearances, then life takes its cue and begins to recompose. The meetings settle, the calls come, the doors open, the not enough deserts bloom, and you have no sensation of pushing it because you didn't. The ghetto falls out of you, and so it stops gathering around you. So let me speak to you like a friend. Stop outrunning your anxiety by changing scenery. Do not confuse motion with progress, nor novelty with guidance. Sit down inside the truth you already know. I and the Father are one. The Father within doeth the works. And rest there until the strain loses its throne. You may rest assured, when the worship moves from control to presence, the same old prayer becomes communion, and the same old life cannot help but change. First the hush within, then the added without. First the kingdom recognized, then the evidence made flesh. That is the way out of any ghetto, by consciousness first, and then, without strain, by everything else. Now we have to set a gate across this road. And I must say it plainly, because without this, nothing I have said will move from letter to life. Prayer cannot succeed while we harbor hate, prejudice, resentment, division. A house divided against itself cannot stand. And if your heart is at war with your brother while your lips are speaking to God, you have built a wall in the very channel through which grace would flow. You remember the word that cuts to the bone, and I do not soften it because it is mercy in disguise. If a man say, I love God, and hateth his brother, he is a liar. You may rest assured, this is not a moral ornament, it is a law of operation. The presence you are seeking is indivisible, and where we set up divisions in our own breast, we shut the door on the very one we intend to welcome. So the Master gives us operational commands, not for piety, but for practice. Pray for your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them that hate you. And again, he gives you the altar procedure, and it is as practical as any instruction you will hear. If thou bring thy gift to the altar, and there rememberest that thy brother hath aught against thee, leave there thy gift. First be reconciled to thy brother, and then come and offer thy gift. Do you see how exact that is? Heaven will not take your offering ahead of your reconciliation, Grace waits at the threshold of peace. Even the prayer we recite in our sleep binds us to the condition. Forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. Not because God is bartering forgiveness, but because refusal to forgive is refusal to participate in the flow that is already given. Now let me show you why this ends overthinking. Resentment is a mental engine that cannot idle. It keeps the mind looping in courtroom speeches, rehearsals, defenses, verdicts, the chatter that drowns the still small voice. Prejudice is a pair of dark glasses. It colors every fact before it arrives, and then we think we need more thought to fix what our bias has already twisted. Forgiveness is the unclenching. It is laying down the inner weapon so the hand can open. And when the hand opens, the heart follows. And when the heart opens, the hush appears. And in the hush, presence is felt. Where thought ends, grace begins. And nothing ends thought faster than the cessation of inner war. So here is your practice, and I ask you to do it today, not tomorrow. Identify one person or one group you have been opposing. Someone in your house, your office, your politics, your past. Bring them into the inner room, not to argue with them, but to bless them. Silently, simply. God is as much their life as mine. All that the Father hath is theirs. I release them to the care of the one presence. Then relinquish the right to rehearse the story. Honestly, lay it down as you would a hot coal. And if the mind picks it up again, you lay it down again. If words help, borrow the Master's. Father, forgive them. And let it include, Father, forgive me my clinging. Refuse the luxury of superior virtue. God is equally the God of saint or sinner, white or black, Jew or Gentile, friend or foe. And you are not appointed to edit his family. Let peace be the altar you return to, again and again, until the quiet holds. You watch what happens. The looping mind loses fuel. The breath deepens. The presence that seemed far off is here. And prayer ceases to be a speech and becomes communion. Out of that, added things appear: health, harmony, wholeness, joy, peace, power, dominion, success. Because the channel is open and the house is one. Forgiveness is not decoration. It is the doorway. Step through it, and grace will meet you before you take the second step. Now we are going to do something very simple, and believe it or not, it is the very hinge on which the whole life swings. We are not going to pray for anything at all. We are going to seek the kingdom. We are going to feel, not think, the Father within, and we are going to sit still until an answering response comes. This is an experiment, practical, gentle, exact. You are not going to manage God, and you are not going to manage conditions. You are going to rest until the presence is felt as sufficient, and then you will watch what is added. First step. Enter the inner room. Close the door on the world for a few minutes, yes, including religious thoughts. Set the problem outside as you would set a heavy package in the hall. You can pick it up later if you must, but not now. Let the body be at ease. Let the breath find you rather than you chasing it. If you notice the forehead knitting, let it smooth. If you find the shoulders climbing, let them drop. We are doing nothing dramatic, only ceasing to push. Second step. Release the outlining mind. All pictures of money, health, people, deadlines, let them be like photographs on a wall seen and then passed by. We are not destroying them, we are withdrawing our worship. If a word helps, take the gentlest. Father, here, or I and the Father are one. Say it once or twice, not as persuasion, but as agreement, and then grow quiet. Third step. Wait in quiet expectancy. No bargaining, no clock watching, no virtue contests. Just a poised listening. Not for a voice in the ear, but for a rightness in the heart. The subtle sense that the burden has slipped from your hands to larger hands. This is the threshold. How will you know? You will know by the markers you have already tasted in other moments of grace. The urgency in the mind fades. The body softens without your telling it to. The breath lengthens, and there arises a gentle certainty without sentences. Often no instruction comes at all, only peace, and that peace is instruction. Sometimes a simple direction appears. Wait. Call. Apologize. Go to Cherith. It is never in the key of panic. It carries its own assurance. That is the answering response. Now the maintenance. When thought starts again, return. When fear speaks, return. When you want to bargain, return. Drop the argument as you would a hot coal. If you need a bridge, whisper, Father, forgive this clinging, and be still again. Return and return until presence becomes the dominant fact and the mind learns its right occupation. Silence, receptivity, consent. You may rest assured. This is prayer. At the instant you stop managing with thought and rest until presence is felt as sufficient, prayer becomes communion, and the word begins its journey into flesh. Do this briefly and often, on waking, at noon, before sleep, and you watch what happens. Added things appear: health, harmony, wholeness, joy, peace, power, dominion, success, not because you demanded them, but because you consented to the one who lives your life. The Father within doeth the works, and when you let him, the works follow. Now let us carry this out of the inner room and into the street, because truth must walk, or it remains poetry. The way is not complicated. You maintain the shift by many little returns. Before a call, pause. Before a meeting, pause. Before you answer an email, pause. Before you spend, pause. Before you eat, pause. Before you sleep, pause. Not a sermon each time. 10 seconds, 20. Just enough to let the mind set down its tools and let the Father within take his seat. Father, here. Once, perhaps twice, and then a breath that finds you. Where thought ends, grace begins. And when grace begins, conduct is guided, and conditions compose themselves without your strain. You remember the Master's sequencing. Take no thought. Seek the kingdom. Let it be added. Do that rhythm in miniature all day. No thought. Stop the inner outlining. Seek. Consent to the presence felt, if only as the lightest hush. Let it be added. Move on the peace that follows, not on hurry. If there is no peace yet, wait 3 breaths longer, or say nothing. Honestly, you will discover that silence is often the strongest word in the room. And when you do speak after that hush, there is weight to it. Few words, clean words, effective words. Now I want to relieve you of one habit, and I will put it as a simple rule for overthinkers. The moment you notice looping, rehearsing, fixing, explaining, judging, that is your bell. Stop. Do not perfect the prayer. Return to presence. Do not add another reason. Add a breath. Do not tighten to get it right. Loosen to let it flow. If you must use a phrase, use the gentlest. I and the Father are one. Or, Father, hear. And then consent to quiet. You will be moved first in consciousness and then in circumstance. Never reverse the sequence. And let us not apologize for outcomes. There is nothing in the world too good for the children of God. Supply, opportunity, safety, companionship, success, yachts, palaces, and, believe it or not, better things than those. Wisdom, peace, authority, joy. But none of it is achieved by strain. It is the overflow of realized presence. It is the Word made flesh, the Christ within showing himself as form without. You watch what happens when you live by these small returns. The right email comes without chase. The meeting settles without combat. The appetite balances without force. The check arrives. The idea wakes you before dawn. The door opens you did not know was in that wall. So here we are at the gate of practice. And I ask only for your agreement, because agreement is entry. Are you willing to live by returning? Are you willing to let the kingdom rule and let the evidence be added? If so, give the answering response now, simply. Yes, I believe that. Even if you are not yet proving it on every front, you can practice it on the next breath. Return and return until presence becomes the dominant fact of your day, and then you will find that life itself bears witness. Health, harmony, wholeness, joy, peace, power, dominion, success, added without pleading, because the Father within doeth the works. Thank you, and bless you.